For many landscape photographers, autumn landscape photography is the highlight of the year. But how do you get the most out of the beautiful scenery autumn has to offer? And that's exactly what this video is about. Hi, I'm Kim from Landscape to Art, and I'm here to help you improve your landscape photography with a focus on developing your skills as a photographer and less on the gear you use. And if this is your first time here, make sure you click the subscribe button below. As the approach of autumn means that the days are getting colder and darker, and not everyone appreciates the autumn season, as it also means that the winter is coming close. But for landscape photographers, autumn is one of the most beautiful times of the year, and it speaks for itself with all the amazing colors you can photograph. But it's easy to get blinded by the beautiful vistas and amazing colors. But there is also much more you can photograph during the autumn than just the scenery. So let's get started. So the first question to ask is when is the best time to photograph autumn colors? And remember that the window is very short. You just have just a couple of weeks, or at best 2 or 3 weeks to photograph the fall colors at its peak. And where the colors are at its best depends on where in the world you are. And the peak season tends to come earlier in the northern hemisphere than in the southern regions. If the summer has been dry and hot, the colors peak earlier compared to if the summer has been wet and where the peak season comes later. And of course, if you have had a lot of wind, the time span will be much shorter for photographing fall colors. But in general, mid-October until November tends to be the best time for autumn colors in most regions. I have added a couple of links to websites that tries to predict when is the time for the best fall colors, and you can find these links in the description below. So the next question is, how can you take advantage of the different weather conditions autumn has to offer? And of course, autumn has a lot of weather, different weather. It can be raining, it can be wind, fog and mist. And as a landscape photographer, you have to get the most out of all these conditions. But of course, also nice clear days are good for landscape or autumn photography. One of the best times is in the morning when there is, after a cold clear night, where there is mist and fog layers on the ground, and that can make for some very nice compositions. Similarly, if the fog is laying on water and you climb a little bit higher up and you can photograph down in valleys and with the fog cover, but the thing is, you have to get out early to get these photos. And also, if you look at nights tends to be colder, and combining frozen leaves and frost on the ground is also a good way of photographing autumn colors. And if you live in places where it's snowing, you can also try to capture the first snowfall for the season. And mountain peaks with snow and the brown, yellow, red colors of fall colors can be very contrasty and very beautiful landscape photos. When you photograph fall colors or autumn colors, you should avoid direct sunlight into the composition. Because if you're shooting into the sun, it results in less saturated colors. And when you photograph autumn, it's the colors that is the most important part. But you can photograph backlit fall foliage, and that can create nice effects. But be aware of lens flare, and you should also try to avoid having the sun in the frame, because if your lens have dirt on it, it's very easy to get lens flare. But if you're doing this well, backlit fall colors or fall foliage can make for very nice images. In general, overcast weather for landscape photography is not the best conditions, and when it's overcast, the weather is or the light is kind of gray, and it's not very interesting. There is There is no shadows and no contrast. But if you photograph fall colors, overcast weather is very good for to bring out the colors. Because when it's overcast, you avoid the glare and reflections from the leaves, and it results in more vibrant colors. And also with autumn colors, autumn photography, you should not avoid the golden hours, because golden hour is already great time for photography or for landscape photography. But when you're photographing fall colors, the golden light that is created during sunrise and sunset will increase or make the colors even more colorful. So what should you photograph during autumn, or to get the most out autumn color photography? The most obvious, of course, are trees and woodlands. And with wide angle lens, you can cover a lot. So you can photograph big vistas and make for some very patchy and contrasty, colorful images. As I said, it's easy to be blown away by beautiful colors and big landscapes, big vistas. But during autumn also the ground of the forest ground changes. So you should try to capture intimate landscapes. Go with macro lenses and go very low on the ground and look for leaves that had already fallen down. And you can find mushrooms and look for details. There is a lot of things that can actually make for great photos with all these colors, even on the ground. And if you have a macro lens, this is a good time to pick up the macro and try to capture the close-ups from the landscape or the ground. And you should use a shallow depth of field and a wide aperture in the range of 2.8 or f4 to isolate subjects. But remember, when you are using or close-ups, you have a very narrow depth of field. But so focus is important here. But if you can isolate specific a mushroom or a leaf, then you want to blur the background behind. So you make this mushroom stand out from the rest of the scenes. Color and color contrast is the most important part of autumn photography. So you should look for contrasting elements, complementary colors. And if you can isolate a single tree from the rest of the forest, a red tree among other more yellow trees, it will make for a very eye-catching composition. And also don't forget to look up, because the sky is blue and the sky contrasts very well with fall colors. Another thing you can try to photograph during autumn is reflections. And water with the colors from the trees or forest reflected in the water can make for a very nice composition. And you should try to balance the composition so you make it symmetrical. And of course, to photograph reflections, you need a day with no wind. If you have ripples on the water, you will lose everything of the reflection. So, but look around, and you don't have to photograph a big water or a big lake. You can also look for small ponds in the forest or wherever you are going, and everything will be reflected into the water as long as it's totally still. So be creative. Try to look for different compositions. And while talking about composition, it's easy to get hang up in the colors and forget about the composition. So you should not only focus on the colors when you are doing auto photography, but remember composition. Use the composition guides that you have learned before. Another thing I like to do, and which works well with when you have a lot of colors, is to do intentional camera movement. And that means you are using a longer shutter speed, like set your camera to a shutter speed of 1/3 of a second up to a half second or even longer. Remember, it must be long enough to capture the motion blur. That's what you're aiming for with intentional camera movement photography. So what you're doing is and for forest photography, when the trees are horizontal, it's better to use an upward or downward movement of the camera. So what you're doing is that you are as you're clicking the shutter, you're moving the camera up or down in a steady movement actually. But you have to try how fast you have to move the camera and combine this with the shutter speed. But you can get some really artistic effects and creative effects by doing this. And doing intentional camera movement photography is of course ideal late afternoon when the light is getting limited and you have to increase the shutter speeds anyhow. Regarding camera settings for autumn photography, it's nothing actually you need in particular you need to be aware, except maybe for white balance. If you are shooting JPEGs and you are saving your files as JPEG and not RAW, auto white balance might not be the best shooting at golden hours, for example, as the camera might try to neutralize the colors. If you're using JPEG, try to set the camera to daylight settings. That will keep the warmer colors. And you should also try to experiment a little bit with white balance. But of course, if you are using or saving your files as RAW, you can adjust the white balance in post. So then it's not an issue actually. So the same applies if you're shooting in shade or an overcast day. The natural light in this situation has a bluish color to it, and the camera, if it's on auto, might tend to try to neutralize the colors, and then you will not get the punch from the autumn colors that you are looking for. So try to experiment with a warmer white balance settings like the cloud setting or the shade setting, if these are available on your camera. So except for the white balance, the settings of your camera is just similar to any other situation. It's nothing special you need to consider, except maybe for the shutter speed if it's windy. Then you have to decide if you want to freeze the movement of the trees or the leaves, or you want to get creative and blur them, like I explained with the intentional camera movement. When it comes to equipment, when you're photographing autumn colors, it's nothing special that is required, except for maybe a circular polarizer filter. This is a typical situation where such a filter can be a good idea to use on your lens, because the circular polarizer will remove unwanted glare from the leaves if it's raining or on wet days. And also this polarizer will saturate the colors more, and even the sky turns more blue if you use a polarizer filter. And also if you are photographing reflection, as I mentioned, it can be a good idea to use the polarizer on reflection photography. Other than that, as always, when you're shooting landscape, a tripod can be useful if you want to do longer exposures. So a circular polarizer and a tripod is, in addition to your camera, of course, it's what you will need for equipment for autumn photography. So to sum up this, the most important fall colors doesn't last for long, so you have no time to waste. Be creative and think about composition. Try something different than only great vistas. You have to be creative. Most photographers that are doing autumn photography, they post-process their photos. And you can target specific colors when you edit. And that's something which is very important, because you can bring out more color contrast with editing. So now, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And as usual, if you have any comments or questions, just post them in the comment section below. And then until next time, ha det bra, goodbye.